Hello, everyone. My name is Ralph C. Jensen. I am the Editor-in-Chief of Security Today magazine. Welcome to today's webinar sponsored by ASA Abloy. In light of recent tragedies, classroom security upgrades have become a high priority for many school districts and higher education facilities. The unfortunate reality is that funds are not always readily available to support such initiatives, but there is emotional drive from administration and the public to do something, and secondary barricade locks or supplemental braces that force a door shut are becoming a quick fix. However, these devices remain non-compliant and therefore illegal in most jurisdictions. ASA Abloy has teamed up with the National Association of State Fire Marshals, the Partner Alliance for Safer Schools, and the National Fire Protection Agency to educate you on this important topic. In today's webinar, you'll learn how you can protect your students and faculty while maintaining code compliance with the use of approved and appropriate door hardware. Our speakers today are Michael Garcia, James L. Greason, John Montes, and David Higginson. Jim Greason is the Indiana State Fire Marshal. He was appointed by the Governor, Mitchell Davis, in 2008. Jim served the Indianapolis Fire Department for 26 years and was appointed chief in 2004 until he retired 4 years later. Mike Garcia is the National End User Manager, K-12 Safe Schools at HID Global, Director of Partner Alliance at Safer Schools. He manages K-12 school business vertical in the United States for the Physical Access Control Solutions at HID Global. He is a board member at PassK12.org, which establishes security standards for K-12 districts nationwide. John Montes is an emergency services specialist at NFPA. John has worked in EMS in several different roles, from private service to the Boston EMS. He also served as an EMS specialist, EMS duty chief for the County of Santa Clara, California EMS Agency. David Higginson is the Director of Business Development at ASA Abloy Group brands Corbin Russwin and Sargent. David is the Director of Business Development for these two brands. He has been in the security industry for more than 30 years and has extensive experience working with schools and universities to ensure student safety. Now, before we get started, there's a couple of items I want to bring to your attention. If at any time during the next hour you would like to submit a question, just look for the Ask a Question console. At the end of the presentation, I will moderate a Q&A session. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, click on the Help button located below the slide window, and you will receive technical assistance. And finally, after this event today, a digital version will be placed on our website tomorrow morning for an on-demand viewing opportunity. With all that, I'd like to hand it over to Jim.
Thank you, Ralph. I appreciate that. Well, good morning or afternoon, everyone, from wherever you may be watching today. Again, my name is Jim Greason. I'm currently the State Fire Marshal in Indiana, and the Vice President of the Board of Directors for the International Association of Fire Marshals. Over the past 20 years, the issue of classroom security has been driven into the consciousness of America by high-profile mass shootings perpetrated in our elementary, middle, high schools, as well as colleges and universities. There are many facets of this discussion, including the role of mental health programs, school administrative staffing, training, and increased security in our learning environments. The focus of our webinar today is a discussion of security, brought to you from a variety of different perspectives. My perspective as State Fire Marshal is ensuring life safety in the learning environment while providing necessary level of physical security, always maintaining free egress from classrooms, areas of assembly, and offices. With the time I have, I'd like to share with you the approach endorsed by the National Association of State Fire Marshals and what we have experienced as best practices, bring multiple stakeholders to achieve the compliant classroom security. And we have involved International Association of Fire Chiefs, firefighters, many National Fire Protection Association, and many other organizations in reaching our goals. The school security is a very complex subject, as you can see just by this slide. It involves a balance of life safety, building fire codes, accessibility laws, security guidelines that have been developed by subject matter experts over time. Unfortunately, school security is also a highly emotional issue, and solutions are often proposed and implemented without full consideration of the balance of life safety and fire suppression. Can a classroom be secure while also being safe and follow code? Surely, of course it can. And security was the only lens used to view this issue. Then the solutions come easily, but they also come with neglect of life safety and accessibility during a normal environment, and that is such an important issue to keep in the forefront. As you can see by this slide, there are many variations of different appliances aftermarket that have been produced and marketed on the market today. When security is the only consideration, and it all too often is, solutions are easy to find. Today, the market is crowded with a quick fix ideas and often make people feel good because they have done something. There is something new, it's physical, it's visible, attached to the opening that gives them a sense of security. We don't dispute these are well-intended, and many of them are well-intended. In fact, they violate law, federal accessibility law, state laws pertaining to life safety and fire codes. In most cases, we find these types of devices installed by someone who is in a hurry to do something, and they acted without engaging all the stakeholders, as oftentimes they are well-intended. I can just elaborate a little bit. Here in Indiana, we approach this as all these situations as all hazards, and we involve all areas of public safety in the discussion of how we approach these solutions in Indiana, and we have been very successful in avoiding many of these situations with these aftermarket products. But if they're not careful, some of these expensive, some of these low cost, and some of these apparatus and appliances can be of an extended expense. In a hurry to do something with best practices and best intentions, City College of San Francisco installed 100 secondary locking devices, or barricades, at a cost of over $200,000. They were subsequently ordered by the state to remove the devices due to noncompliance with the fire codes, and the realization that these devices that keep someone from entering and it also prevents someone from exiting, creating an environment where a person can be entrapped by a person who intends to do them harm. And many school situations don't always start from outside the classroom; they start from inside the classroom. So these devices can also cause people not to be able to exit. In retrospect, it had been easy if the college administrators would have just taken a little time and looked on their website, and they could have found a better and less expensive way. In 2011, the Division of the State Architect issued guidance and compliance with an Assembly Bill 2011 in California regarding the issue of classroom security locking hardware. The requirement was subsequently codified by the California Building and Code and remains today as a provision and requirements for the balance of security and life safety accessibility. So where should we begin this discussion of school security and classroom security? Obviously, all too often, it begins at the classroom door because that's where the event occurred. Obviously, and actually, the classroom door is that last line of defense. If we're looking at school safety as a holistic, we want to start at the perimeter. The perimeter is where we should start looking at school safety. And we also realize that each campus is unique in its design, but what is consistent is that the security that begins at the perimeter, where possible control access points can be installed in remote locations, and design and layered approach that at the and increases in the relationship to the proximity of classrooms. Once the perimeter has been controlled, to the extent possible, the main access points to the building must be controlled. And when this has happened, has been accomplished, then we can address the offices and the classrooms and the classroom doors. In many instances, we see people addressing this in exactly the opposite way. Like I said earlier, the event occurred in the classroom, so let's secure the classroom door. Let's secure the classroom. The approach misses an opportunity to address many of the perpetrators' points of entry from exterior of the building that could have been compromised and slowed the person down or prevented them from entering the building in the first place. Well, at least a successful implementation, as we have found in Indiana, as I've expressed earlier, and as the National Association of State Fire Marshals has seen what works, and we have seen what doesn't work. We've had to boil it down. It looks like this: getting constituents together that each can understand the various perspectives and the existing laws, understanding code compliance, security as achievable, affordable, and effective. What doesn't seem to work well are situations where an emotional drive to rush something has prevailed and excludes all the other perspectives. Some other states have also been successful in implementing legislation to address these issues. In the case of the state of Utah, which has opted to change their state building and fire codes based on the consensus of legislators and informed authorities having jurisdiction, law enforcement, disability rights advocates, and security professionals. In this example, Utah does permit secondary locking devices, but only if it's approved by the authority having jurisdiction, complies with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and meets three other provisions. Those provisions are that unlatching of any doors or leaf by these types of aftermarket appliances must not take more than 2 operations to release and remove. The lock can be released from the opposite side of the door from where it's installed, and it can only be used during a lockdown situation or during a drill. Those are the 3 other opportunities, occasions that it can be used. To help the public with what fire marshals consider to be a very critical subject, the International Association of State Fire Marshals has published a white paper on classroom door security and locking hardware that will be discussed greater in depth, along with many other that I discussed today. At the end of today's webinar, you'll be directed to the end of the resources, to all these resources that you may be interested in obtaining more information on. Again, I'd like to thank you for my time. Again, I'd like to pass the baton to Michael Garcia. Michael.
Thank you, Jim. That was good information. Thank you very much. So I want to start off. I've got a few slides for you today. The information that Jim and John and David have for you is a lot more detailed than mine. But I want to give you some information on an organization called PASS, and then give you our perspective on the blocking and barricade devices that we're talking about today. So for those of you that have not heard about PASS, you can immediately after this call go to the website passk12.org, download the PASS requirements and guidelines for K-12 schools. So basically what you have is the ability to go in, look at where you are currently, cross-reference that with the PASS guidelines and requirements, and start the process of a layered security model at your school. We do not endorse any specific products. We're completely vendor neutral, even though we have vendors and leaders from vendor organizations in PASS. We've all taken the oath to make sure that this is something that is completely vendor neutral and more about the solutions that we're providing. And using technology to replace human efforts and resources instead of endorsing products like some organizations do. So PASS was established by the Security Industry Association and the National Security Contractors Association to bring together expertise from the different education, public safety, industry communities, and develop and support a coordinated approach to the effective use of security practices throughout K-12 environments. So our mission is to provide school administrators, school boards, public safety, and security professionals with information and tools and insight needed to implement a tiered approach to securing and enhancing the safety of school environments. Based on their individual needs primarily, that's why they're tiered 1 through 4, nationwide best practices, and making the most effective use of the resources that are in the school district currently that you've already invested in and that are available. So PASS supports efforts by communities throughout the United States to provide and sustain an effective level of security that's appropriate to each district, and recognize that making schools safer is achievable and very much needed. So if we look at this slide, one of the reasons that PASS requirements are so effective right now is there's no unified security standards across the United States. The Police Foundation put out this study. You should download it. You should look at it. It's really, really, really neat. It gives you good information, good metrics to use with your school boards, to present to the superintendents and the administrators who are looking at ways to establish school security parameters in schools. With this slide right here, what you see is there really is no unified standards. In the military, in the federal government, we would always go to NIST, National Institutes of Standards and Technology, DISA, UIL. We had organizations, and this information was passed out, standards were created, and then you had compliance that you had to comply with. Schools do not have that right now. So if you download the standards for PASS K-12 and look at what we're trying to do, we're in our 4th iteration of the standards. They just got released last month. We had, thousands of downloads so far already. So it works, and it's really creating, it's the first step in creating a standard for K-12 schools. So what does PASS think about the subject today? Well, I'm going to read this to you, and I'm going to read this. This is our official stance, kind of our press stance. The Partner Alliance for Safer Schools fully supports the stand against barricade and door blocker devices. We stand with other organizations, including the National Association of State Fire Marshals, Safe and Sound Schools, Secure Schools Alliance, Door and Hardware Institute, Door Security and Safety Foundation, Security Industry Association, and many more in opposing the deployment of these devices. In addition to life safety and fire code challenges, these devices also violate the ADA law. There are code and ADA compliant solutions that work and are currently in use in most schools. We have additional concerns that many of these door blocking devices that interfere with the efforts of emergency responders to quickly and safely reach staff and students during emergencies. At a time when many districts are reevaluating their security measures and making new investments, it is now more critical than ever to ensure the use of proven, vetted, and code-compliant security practices and make the most of limited resources. So in a nutshell, lock, don't block. And with organizations like ASDID, PASS, DSSF, DHI, even the security magazines are taking stands, now against this. And one of the most recent was Campus Safety, put out a press release on December 14th and said, look, we'll no longer accept ads or sponsorships from companies whose door barricades don't comply with ADA and NFPA codes. Period. End of statement. And that says a lot for what's going on right now. On this slide, you'll see the ADA standards really quick there. And basically, what you're looking at here with the Door Security and Safety Foundation And if you go to lockdon'tblock.org, you can download this and take a look at some of the things that everybody's getting together to talk about. So why all the hubbub? You know, the barricade devices are perceived to be generally less expensive to purchase from what I have seen personally in traveling the nation, providing security solutions. They're easy to procure and install. You know, you don't have to go through the form of RFP process in many cases. They just cost a few dollars, But while securing the door with a barricade device that may seem to address like your immediate need for security, you have to consider the safety concerns associated with that practice. There's advocates out there that advocate the barricade devices. Of course, there's the companies themselves that go to the schools door to door and sell the devices. But they're saying, and I've heard them say, if the product's not permanently attached to the door, it's not under these codes, it's not under jurisdiction of the code, it's not official, and it's not subject to the same requirements that door locks and security hardware must comply with. So you have to be real careful when somebody says that in the first place, because it kind of sounds like a shortcut. Now, there's some organizations that I have seen out in the field that are recommending barricade, not necessarily door blocking, but barricading. I've heard of ALICE, you know, the ALICE Training Institute, Homeland Security, Department of Education, FEMA in some cases, DOJ, and even the FBI. But you cannot confuse these types of barricades that are used in a classroom, furniture, you know, things like that. None of these recommendations that these institutes that I just mentioned are giving involve the installation of secondary door locking devices. They're using gross motor skills to barricade in the case that they cannot evacuate, and they do not require special door locking devices. So in closing, be very careful what you are listening to and the messages. Make sure they're validated. Make sure you check with the fire chief, with your police chiefs, with your officials in your local jurisdictions, and see if this is even, you should even be talking to these people, because at the end of the day, if you follow the simple rule of lock, don't block, you'll be in a much better place. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mike. And for those of you that are listening, my name is John Montes. I'm an emergency services specialist with the NFPA. And I'm going to be talking to you about NFPA 3000, which is the first and only international standard for an active shooter and hostile event response program. The standard is broad in nature. It was written by the largest technical committee at the NFPA. Currently, it's at 75 members, representing all aspects of the community: law enforcement, fire, EMS, emergency management, healthcare, higher education, lower education. I don't think it's lower. I call it K-12. Private security, private industry, technology companies, building and life safety companies. This is and all of the federal agencies. This was a very large and enormous undertaking, and if you look at the slide, you'll see the PS there. That stands for Provisional Standard. It is the second time in the history of the United States that a standard was given provisional status, meaning that normally it takes 3 to 5 years to develop a standard. This one was accelerated and developed in a compressed timeline for 1 year. Because the standard is provisional does not mean that it is not adoptable or it is not defensible. This is a ANSI accredited standard, just like all other NFPA standards, meaning it's available for adoption legislatively in your communities, states, and federally, as well as it's defensible in court should a case occur where it is used either as a defense or as a mechanism of the complainant. NFPA 3000 was released on May 1st, 2018. The committee, as I said, was very broad in nature, and they worked very diligently throughout 2017 to develop the requirements within the NFPA 3000 standard. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to give you the brief highlights of NFPA 3000. Here's what it does. It provides resources for community leaders and it offers tools to help plan for, respond to, and recover from active shooter hostile events. And when we say community leaders, we don't mean just elected officials. We mean school leaders, principals. We mean parents, people with a voice. Somebody needs to drive the use of the standard within communities. As you were shown, there's the Police Foundation report talking about national standards. I want to actually correct that. That's national codes. Those are laws. And as you can see on that slide that you saw earlier, there's not a lot of laws that have to do with security and safety of schools. And where there are, they're actually found in the fire codes. And that's why NFPA was chosen to develop this standard, because the NFPA standards are considered the gold standards. And NFPA standards are adoptable into legislation and appear in the fire code. So we know how to get this kind of work done. So that's why an organization with the F in their name, even though we do a lot more than fire, developed this standard. Here's what NFPA 3000 doesn't do, and this is actually more critical than what it does. It does not list prevention tips. You will not see anything about guns, gun control, gun safety in NFPA 3000. It also doesn't dictate your local tactics. How you prepare for, respond to, and recover from an active shooter hostile event is completely dictated by your risk assessment, your resource capabilities, and your planning and exercising. You have to figure those things out on your own. 3000 gives you the framework to come to those conclusions and do those steps necessary to have a program in place. As 3000 was being written last year, in 2017, we noticed that there was these 4 concepts that kept coming up. The first concept is that many people view active shooter hostile events as a law enforcement incident, that law enforcement is in charge. That's factually inaccurate. It is an entire community's incident. Law enforcement has their components that they're responsible for, but so do fire and EMS. And everybody in the entire community, including children, parents, public, responders, healthcare, emergency managers, leaders, elected officials, everybody has a role to play. And well, you say, well, how does a kid have a role to play? Well, a kid in a school should be taught what the procedures are for lockdown, or what the procedures are for if there's a threat in the school, or how to report it. So everyone has a role to play. Members of the community should be taught some kind of defensive thing: run, hide, fight, avoid, deny, defend. There's many of them. And I do want to make a note of one. I heard one of the previous presenters mention ALICE. It's important to note that ALICE is a proprietary private program that teaches a form of tactic. But that's not necessarily the tactic that you have to choose. There's others like run, hide, fight, avoid, deny, defend, and many more. What tactic you choose, again, like I said before, is based on your local capabilities, resources, and risk assessment, and what you want to do that works best for your community. So it's the whole community's responsibility. The second part is unified command. And what unified command means is, and 3000 took it a step further than it ever was before, is in the concepts of incident command or incident management, everyone assumes that unified command is law enforcement, fire, and EMS. And in most cases it is. However, if one of these incidents happens at an occupancy or a facility or a school, a representative that is familiar with that location and familiar with that location's plans, resources, and capabilities must be part of unified command. I can give no better example than what occurred in Parkland, Florida, where police were inaccurately making decisions based on 20-minute delayed video because nobody from the school was informing the police commander that that video was on delay. That's why you have to plan ahead of time. That's why you have to exercise. You have to build those familiarities. The chair of the NFPA 3000 committee is Rich Serino, former deputy administrator of FEMA and former chief of Boston Emergency Medical Services. And Rich has a saying: the time of the emergency is the last time or place you should ever be trading business cards. Build those familiarities ahead of time in your community. The next piece is integrated response, and it goes hand in hand with unified command. Police, fire, and EMS must work together in integrated teams to access victims as quickly as possible. And this ties directly to the use of barricade devices, and I'll get to that shortly. And then the last piece is planned recovery. These incidents last anywhere from 2 to 12 minutes on average. However, we spend hours, days, hours, years, months, everything planning for them. for those 2 to 12 minutes. How much time are we spending planning for recovery that lasts years in perpetuity after these events? The 3000 Committee is dedicated to ensuring that recovery is something that you plan for and you start planning for it today. How are you going to manage donations? How are you going to manage volunteers? I heard the fire marshal from Indiana earlier mention that it's part of the all hazards program, and it absolutely can be. However, many all hazards programs view recovery only from the perspective of disaster. In an active shooter hostile event, there's no such thing as short-term recovery. You don't turn on the lights, restore power, get people home to their houses, and now recovery is done. These events go on forever, so recovery has some specific needs for these events, and that information can be found in the standard. You take all of this information and you create your program, and we actually have a template right here for the program that's available on NFPA.org, but the program basically consists of more than just the response community. And the program, like I said before, can be part of your all hazards plan, an annex to it, or it can be its own special program. It's up to the local jurisdiction and the facility itself or the school itself to decide where they put this. We just give you the tools and resources for, at a minimum, to know who needs to be at the table when you start developing these plans. Next thing is facility readiness, and facility readiness has its own special chapter in NFPA 3000, and as you can see, it's based on the characteristics, creating a plan, sharing it, and integrating it with others. Critical. How many schools and how many places out there write their plans and their response community has no knowledge of what their expectations are at the school? It actually occurs far more than most think. And if you're saying, I can't get my responders to come and plan with us at the school, now there's a defensible standard that requires it and something you can reference. And then you have to develop plans for specific notification and exercise. So you can actually, the standard requires at a minimum an annual exercise per facility or per campus. It doesn't have to be boots on the ground full scale. It can be tabletop or functional. But one exercise per year for active shooter hostile events is now required for any school or other facility deemed by the local authority to need to have an emergency action plan. So that is also in the standard. So how does it affect door security and safety? Well, in Chapter 9, NFPA 3000 requires compliance with NFPA 101, which is the Life Safety Code. So here's the deal with that. That means no barricade devices. It does mean code-compliant locks. For example, in an educational lock, you can see it's lockable and openable with a single motion from the inside and accessible from the outside of the room via key, key card, keypad, or other method. So let's game this out. An incident has occurred. You've locked the doors in the room. You've locked down. The assailant can't get in because they don't have a key, key card, or keypad to enter the room, hopefully. Part of your plans is to be able to prevent having bad people access those items. The people in the room are waiting for help. Help comes. They have access to the room because through unified command and integration with the facility, they've been given access to those rooms, and they can quickly come in and provide medical services and rescue to the victims within the room. But let's game this out another way. You've used a barricade device, and you've barricaded yourself in the room. And a bit of history, and I saw the question come through earlier, and not a single one of these active shooter incidents has a shooter breached a simply locked door. They've shot through doors, they've shot through walls, but they've never breached a locked door. So using this example, the shooter shoots through the door, and the person who engaged the barricade device is the only person in the room that knows how to use it. Perhaps it's a teacher, and the room is full of small children. Now I, the paramedic responder that arrives on scene, am trying to access the room to render aid, but the injured teacher cannot disengage the barricade device. And I can't access the room to rescue the children and provide medical care to the teacher. The average human being with an arterial bleed can bleed out in 90 seconds. Those devices are dangerous if for no other reason that they could prevent someone from being rescued when they're injured. When the data and evidence shows that a simple code-compliant lock is effective. So What do I want you to do with this information? I've only given you a very brief update on NFPA 3000, and there's much more to learn. So learn more about it. Get involved in your community. Go through the standard and find the things that are relevant to you and your role in the community and share it with your partners. Next thing I want you to do is learn more, and you can learn more at nfpa.org/3000news, all one word. We've created an online learning. Can you go back one slide for me? We've created an online learning program. Anyone who's a public employee gets a 30% discount on the online program, and it creates a badging system so you can actually achieve certificates and badges showing that you're displayed proficiency in using the 3000 standard. I hope to see some questions, and I'll go into the Q&A with all the other speakers. And at this point, I'd like to hand it off to David.
Thanks, John. Hello, everybody. My name is Dave Higginson, and I'd like to spend my time this afternoon taking you through some of the many solutions that schools and universities have access to secure both perimeter and interior doors. All the solutions that I mentioned today meet the codes and ADA requirements that have already been discussed today. So this first slide, don't do it. So when speaking about school security, I always like to start with it. This slide, because the top 10 things that compromise codes and security, if you review this, you may find several of these being broken today in your schools. And every school can have the best laid out security plan, but when it comes to not following and small things are allowed to happen, security breaks down pretty quickly. So the first step every school or university should make is making sure you're currently not doing any of these things that are compromised codes and security. We've heard today about the risks of acting too quickly and that many school communities have been quick to react to a number of internal and external pressures, which leads to spending unnecessarily by implementing measures that may create more harm than good and actually break life safety and fire codes, along with failing to meet ADA requirements. So don't react because of pressure and implement a quick solution that breaks the codes, like we've seen on previous slides and on this slide. Use common sense and ask questions about what's available, either through retrofitting existing hardware or purchasing new hardware that will satisfy your needs and not break fire and life safety codes. Let's take a look at some of the products, methods, and options that are in the market today. Again, these could be used in new construction or if you're looking to retrofit an existing opening. Most importantly, these products don't break the code. Starting with perimeter classroom and exterior doors. Exit devices perform a crucial function of facilitating safe exiting while restricting access to the outside from the outside. Typically used on perimeter doors, panic devices are the first line of defense against intruders, and their specific function should be carefully considered. Implementing solutions to restrict access to buildings and controlling traffic through perimeter doors is key to a successful security plan. Card access locks or trims allow monitoring and auditing who's coming and who's going. Exit devices with electronic monitoring options can also improve school security. When tied to an access control system, many parts of the devices can be monitored for movement, including the latch bolt and lever. This helps eliminate security breaches caused by doors being propped open or vandalized. For schools that have an open or campus concept, where many of those classroom doors lead to an exterior and require exit devices, there are options that are available today to lock the outside trim from the inside. The option can come with a locked or unlocked indicator, which visually confirms that the outside trim is locked and still allows for safe exiting. There are many options to secure interior doors as well, from mechanical to electrified to electronic access control locks tied to a central monitoring point. Your security policy must address what types of hardware should be used throughout your school. In identifying your school plan, must One must review the pros and cons of each. So let me take you through some of the options of securing interior doors that we have today. 1, doors remain locked at all times, typically known as a storeroom function. The outside lever is locked and a key must be used to gain entry while always providing free egress. Doors can be locked from the inside with a key, which is probably the most common used over the past 20 years. Rotating the key on the inside cylinder locks the outside lever. Typically also includes a visual indicator and a directional arrow or words for mortise locks, or in board or cylindrical locks, directional arrows or words to help make it more intuitive. Both types of locks allow free egress from the inside. Also available are thumb turns. Rotating the thumb turn will lock the outside lever. Can include a visual indicator and a directional arrows and words as well to help make it more intuitive and also provide free egress. Or a push button, typically found in a board or cylindrical lock. Pushing the button will lock pushing the button on the inside lever locks the outside lever, and you still will have free egress. Also, you can use a fob, usually used with a standalone access control lock set, and by pushing the fob button, the lock will go into lockdown mode, locking the outside lever while allowing free egress from the inside. Or an overall lockdown. A button can be located at a central point or localized at every opening, and pushing the button down the button will lock down a bank of doors or an individual opening. As you can see here, there are many options that can be incorporated during the retrofitting or upgrading existing openings or even during new construction. One of these methods, or using a combination of these methods, can work for you. It all comes down to your overall security plan and what makes the most sense for each of you, for each school. So I'd like to take some time to talk about some recent trends that we're seeing. Now that you know the types of options that are out there, I'd like to take a few minutes here to share those trends. These trends may help you finalizing an upgrade or a new construction project. After years of monthly lockdown drills, some schools have decided to move away from using a key on the inside to lock down outside levers. Reason being that even though the drills are practiced monthly or quarterly, teaching professionals are still finding it difficult to lock the opening down quickly and easily. In lieu of the key, they are moving to a thumb turn on the inside of the mortise locks or a push button on the board or cylindrical locks. As I mentioned earlier, this is a school district decision on what method best fits their needs. Some other trends or wants that we are seeing and being asked for with lock indicators is bigger and bolder windows with visibility from all angles. Bigger, bolder, 180-degree of visibility reduces the likelihood of someone within the room stepping back in harm's way when sheltering in place. Bright and reflective helps deliver the indicator message as well. Even in an event of very low lighting, or when sheltering in place and the drill requires teaching professionals to turn off the lights, they will be able to see the indicator, whether it's been locked or it's in the unlocked position. Engraving and color options are also important. Directional engraving helps the teaching professionals secure the door quickly. On color, we see a mix when it comes to end user preferences when deciding what colors they want to use for locked and unlocked. Some prefer the red-green option, while others prefer the red-white option. Also, secure and unsecure, along with symbols or the combination of both, are being requested. With the increase in foreign students in colleges and universities, the availability of foreign languages like Spanish and French is also a nice option to have with your lock indicators. The combination of engraving, language, symbols help deliver the message quickly to the teaching professionals and students, allowing them to secure the opening without hesitation. I realize I only touched on door hardware today, but remember, door openings are very complex systems that include doors, frames, locks, strikes, and door control components. These components all must work together. Properly functioning doors and hardware are crucial to maintaining the safety of students and staff. Remember, help is only a phone call away. There are many ways that the hardware professionals can help. We can assess the condition and security of all your openings and your schools. We can recommend fixes and upgrades that meet the codes. And we can help educate by providing access to things like mobile showrooms so that your security questions can be answered and understood prior to implementing anything. So if you'd like to visit our resources at www.asaabloydss.com/classroom security, you'll be able to register to get more information and possibly find local representation that could help you through any questions that you may have. And that, I'll turn it back over to the moderator, please.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's jump right into the questions. We have numerous questions. What are your thoughts on barricading from inside with the desk, chairs, etc., versus an actual device?
This is Jim Greason. In Indiana, we passed a law in the two legislation sessions ago that allows a school during a lockdown or during an intruder situation to use what's normal classroom furniture, desks, chairs, and things to barricade a door, but not obviously under any kind of a normal circumstance, only in the instance of an intrusion, an active intrusion.
Next question. I live in a state that originally was against the barrier solutions, but legislators pushed, and the state university accepted these and modified the state building code. What avenues can I research for fighting this?
Yeah, this is Kurt Roper. I'll take that. I think once it's been codified within the state building code, the most viable path to change that are proposed changes during the next cycle of the building code, and building the alliances with state fire marshals and other public safety professionals to support that code change to reverse what's already been done.
Okay, next question. We get many requests by faculty to add thumb turns or similar locks to rim panic hardware equipped doors exiting into stairways. We inform them that these are not allowed by code. Is this correct, or are we missing innovations in hardware that allow a similar added device?
This is Kurt, and I'll take that, and then perhaps Dave Higginson would add to it at the end. What I believe they're asking is, can I put a deadbolt onto a door? When they say a thumb turn, I'm assuming it's a deadbolt onto a door that has panic or fire exit hardware. The very short answer to that is no, because you've defeated the purpose of the panic or fire exit hardware allowing emergency egress at all times. So it feels like a quick fix, and it is absolutely a violation of the fire code, and it is a danger to the occupants of the facility.
Any add-on comments, gentlemen?
Yeah, this is Dave Higginson. And I shared something, and maybe I was a little quick with it on my one slide, but on certain doors, exterior doors, like we see typically out in California, Nevada, Arizona, and the campus kind of atmosphere, where the doors lead out into a courtyard. There are options for exit devices with a key on the inside that will lock the outside lever, or a thumb turn as well that will lock the outside lever, but you will always be able to gain or have free egress from that building. But you can lock down the outside of the door, and to Kurt's point, you have to be careful of what doors this is applied to.
Next question. Schools have this concern. While fire code compliant, any lock that allows someone other than the teacher in the classroom the ability to lock from the inside may also provide the opportunity to lock out teachers, other adults, or responders. I imagine at the end of the day it's a matter of weighing risks. Your thoughts?
This is John.
This is Ron
I'd like
here.
to jump in on this one.
Okay, go ahead, please.
So it is a matter of weighing risk versus reward, but I would say that part of balancing that is proper planning. So if you have a school that has compliant locks and the ability to lock someone out of a room, you would also have plans, policies, and procedures in place to quickly re-access the room. The other piece of that is I would flip this statement and say if you're using a barricade device, you could easily barricade an assailant in a room with victims, or you could barricade a teacher out of a room and increase the time it would take for the teacher to re-access the room. So a code-compliant lock with proper planning, policy, and procedure is much safer than a barricade device under those circumstances.
And I believe the next question is for Jeremy. With so many options available in the market, how do we decide which code-compliant solutions are best for our institution?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think hopefully the takeaway from everyone here is you heard a lot around policies and procedures, and I think if you live within those perspectives, there's a number of different solutions that would work in particular situations. And to give you an example, as I went on my daughter's kindergarten orientation, the way that their school district handles this situation is it's just their policies and procedures that the door lock will remain in a locked position with the door open during classroom time. So in the event of a situation where they would need to close the door, they would just shut the door and no one would have to worry about potentially locking that door. So that solution works, obviously, other scenarios as well, but, really just try to focus in on, establishing a policy and procedure that everyone buys into and understands, and then obviously understanding the ramifications of that and the different solutions, that are available and the outcome that they will give you. So, just make sure your policies and procedures are up to date.
Can I add a little bit to that? This is Mike. That's exactly right. And I would also add, I suggest you to think Legos. So when you think Legos, you're talking about a unified command and control infrastructure in your school, no matter how small or how large, but it's enterprise-wide. And you start with a Lego set being a foundation, being your access control system. And on top of that, you put your video and your alarm management, your intrusion detection, and then it goes from there. You start adding things to it. Now, all of those things should be able to talk together. The solutions that David spoke about today, when you look at them, many of them were IP-based. And when you can talk to those classroom doors, then you can open them and close them whenever you need to. With that in mind, and the Lego concept, you want to choose an access control system. You want to choose doors that are able to get to that next phase of your investment. So when the grants come in, when the funding comes in, and you have your plan, and you present that to the grant people, and you present that to the funding people, you say, I have a plan. I need money now to make it right. You're more apt to get that money. When you do get the money, then you can add to your Lego set. So that's my philosophy on this.
Next question. I am with a university in California utilizing persona card access locks. My understanding is only the Sargent line will work with persona. Is there a Sargent solution for panic hardware to be locked with a thumb turn from the interior, but release with the panic hardware?
Well, first, I think there's a couple questions there regarding Persona. Corbin Russman is also available with Persona access control for locks as well. I'm not quite sure if I understand the question fully. As I mentioned earlier, that we do offer panic devices that have the ability to be locked on the inside with a key or a thumb turn and allow egress out of the building or into a stairwell. So I'm not sure if Ron can expand or Jeremy can expand any further on that.
Dave, is that Jeremy? Is that, I think what they're asking potentially is to have that deadbolt feature, I think, from the inside, but I think you mentioned a key previously. I think the question is around, do they have the ability to have the thumb turn deadbolt option, and then when the panic device is actually released, that it will act as one motion and release the door, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. So currently we do not have a deadbolt function like that on a panic device, but we can always look into it, and if they want to investigate this further with me for maybe possibly some other options, they can surely reach out to me, and I'll work with them to see if we can't figure out a solution for them.
Next question, what hardware can be used when a panic device leads into the classroom due to egress path being out of a window onto a fire escape ladder? Anyone want to take that one?
I'm not 100% sure of that answer. I'm not sure if Kurt has a possible better solution, but again, it's something that I can reach out to understand their specific needs a little bit further and understand the total opening before I would possibly give a wrong answer and lead them down the wrong path.
For all of our listeners, all of these questions will be given to the presenters, and they can respond later. I believe we have time for one more question. Here it is. I have been told that fire codes are not applicable in an emergency situation such as an active shooter situation.
Hi, this is John. So that's not necessarily true unless there's state legislation that excludes it. A fire code exists because of an emergency situation. Therefore, it's applicable in an emergency. And remember, there have been situations in which people thought it was an active shooter and it was a fire. There's been multiple instances of that in the past. So fire codes are still applicable. That's why proper planning, policy, and procedure is so critical. And I just wanted to touch on one other question that I saw, which was the ICS NIMS question. It's funny that question was asked. NIMS is NFPA 1600 and ICS is NFPA 1561. Those are root standards for those two things, and they are completely integrated in all planning, policy, and procedure in NFPA 3000 in every state. It's a federal requirement.
Thank you very much. I'd like to take a moment and thank Mike, Jim, John, and David for their presentation. And I would also like to thank our sponsor, Assa Abloy. And thank you all for attending and asking questions. This webinar will be available to you to listen to again or to share with a colleague tomorrow morning. And thank you all for attending today. This ends today's information session.